And we're back on week 2 of our office hours. How you doing this week, Alex?
Very good, thanks. How are you doing?
I am doing great. Welcome to everyone in the live session here. Feel free to comment in the chat where you're dialing in from, and feel free to ask questions at any time. We're happy to answer them live here on this office hours. So let's dive right in. So what was interesting this week in Ethereum and DeFi, Alex?
I think since last office hours, probably the big thing has been ETH2. So we've been obviously monitoring the inflow to the deposit contract through our dashboard. And we also created a new dashboard for the Beacon chain so that people can actually follow along and see what's happening on the actual phase 0, or the next step of Ethereum 2. So that's been probably the biggest thing. And then we have obviously a few other things to talk about afterwards, but perhaps I can just dive right into the Ethereum 2 stuff with the dashboards.
Yeah, let's do it. While you pull up the screen share, I'll just riff a little bit. It was pretty cool watching some of the live streams the other night for the launch. Like, I think there were a couple ones. The Ethereum Foundation did one, but it was almost like New Year's Eve. Everyone was watching, eagerly watching as the launch happened. To me, it was almost more exciting for New Year, more exciting than New Year's Eve. But yeah, let's dive in on this dashboard here.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the same dashboard I think we went over last time, but I thought it'd be interesting to just check in on this again before we go to the Beacon chain dashboard that we created. So you can see a couple of things. First of all, we obviously hit the goal here. And the trend has also been going upwards with regards to how much Ether is getting locked up in the deposit contract. And in fact, it looks like we're close to hitting 1 million ETH locked up in that contract, which is pretty cool. And then, we've got some of the sources here, which I won't go too much into details on this time around, but at least you have like the, overall picture on how much Ether has been flowing in. And it is good to see that it actually continues to grow upwards, hitting that milestone so that the actual Beacon chain would launch on December 1st was really the big thing. But it continues to receive more Ether, which is great. So let me look at the next dashboard for this one. So this one we actually made public, right? So even if you don't have a Nansen account, you can go to pro.nansen.ai/eth2-beacon-chain. So you can see it up here. Maybe we'll drop it in the chat as well. So there we go. Effectively, this shows a lot of different things. It shows the balances on the new chain, effectively, by entity and also by the different labels. And so the one cool thing with Nansen is that we can actually track, based on the deposits into the ETH2 deposit contract, we can actually track the validators that come out on the other side of that. And so that gives us a pretty good overview of what the different validators are and the entities that are actually running those validators. So you can see some of these names that are also visible in the other dashboard, but we also broke it down here in a kind of more raw display where you can see just based on labels too. So you got like one of the specific Bitcoin Swiss depositor addresses is sitting here, and you can see how much Ether they have across the different validators effectively.
Yeah. One that I'll just highlight right there. So we got asked a couple times on Twitter how many ETH ICO wallets actually participated, and we tracked around 13 ETH ICO participants. I guess it doesn't show the number there, but yeah, it was cool to see that the ETH ICO participants had ponied up a few million to support the launch of ETH2, and that's not including Vitalik, who himself put in a pretty substantial amount.
Yeah, 100%. And you can see that, they've got 6,530 ETH. So that means obviously, at least some of them deposited a lot more than they had to. They went beyond just the minimum 32 Ether. You can also see the number of activated validators. So these time series are a bit kind of boring because they're daily, and we obviously don't have that much data yet, right? It went live on December 1st, so there's not much data yet. This one is showing it though per hour, and you can see the number of attestations done by validators over time. We've got some other things here. So skipped blocks, for example. In the beginning, some blocks were skipped, probably because people hadn't really configured their validators correctly. I was one of those people. So I know a few other people who kind of thought that their validators were ready to go, and then when the mainnet went live, there were some issues that thankfully were resolved in most cases. So you can see maybe that's why some of these blocks were skipped initially, but now you can see that the number of blocks being skipped is pretty low actually.
Were you able to kind of debug why your validator wasn't working?
So I think it was one of two things. Either it had to do with like the firewall of the instance that was actually running the node, or it had to do with the local database of the node being corrupted, perhaps because of an earlier version that I'd run. So effectively what I did was like recreated the database and then explicitly set up a better firewall management system so I could see, like, open up the ports that needed to be open and so on. And when I kind of restarted it based on that, then everything was fine.
Yeah, so, it was funny as it was happening. We were all chatting in our Nansen team chat, and then Alex goes silent for a little bit, and then it's just like, uh-oh, my validator is not working.
Yeah. So it is cool though. You can actually go into something like Beacon Scan, which I think we linked to some of these places down here. Yeah, you can go into Beacon Scan and see the status of some of the validators, so you can see if it's attesting properly or not. But yeah, and then we also have slashings. There's only been one slashing, and that happened this morning. And I tweeted about it, and I didn't really get the chance to see what people were saying. But I saw, from memory, I saw that one of the validators proposed a block, and effectively the next slot already they were slashed. So I don't know if it was something, invalid that they were proposing, or I'm not going to attempt to speculate on that because I haven't looked into the details. There's been one instance of slashing, at least since we went live.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that there's probably going to be a couple main types of slashings that are happening in the near future. One is people who have set up their validators incorrectly. And then two is probably some ETH core devs who are testing this mechanism out and just want to make sure that everything's running properly. But I would guess that there's not going to be too many malicious slashings just yet. But either way, it's almost nice that we have this clean and empty little dashboard on here where we can clearly see if someone got slashed.
Yeah, that's true. You can also see validator balances. So this is kind of based on, it's not a great chart, perhaps, the way it's displayed now, based on the pub key. So it's kind of like just a list of all the different validators and then their balance. So I'm actually just going to skip ahead on this one and maybe go down to something which is a bit more fun, which is the graffiti that you can output as a validator. So when you initialize your validator, you can pass in like a graffiti parameter flag, and many people have used that to effectively do a bit of branding or marketing. And so the top one, someone asked me as well on Twitter, like BTCS Zug validator. What does that mean? And BTCS is Bitcoin Swiss. And if you scroll up, you see Bitcoin Swiss is well, here it's displaying it as the single biggest entity running validators. And so basically that's probably what they have put in as their graffiti, and it's a pretty good way to actually do a bit of on-chain marketing, if you will.
So sorry, continue.
No, I was just gonna say you can see a few other ones like Cream in Taiwan. Nice little Taiwanese flag there. You Pi DAO, which some of you might know behind the Do token, and then you see a lot of these proof of attendance protocol or POAP IDs, which I guess I should probably know this, but I guess it entitles you to some kind of NFT or something from the POAP project.
Okay. So is Graffiti kind of like a way of signing blocks? I'm actually not familiar, or I have never dug in on what exactly Graffiti is. So in mining, when people find a block, the mining pool will typically sign the block, so you can tell if it's whether it's F2 pool or Luxor or Slush or something like that. Is this effectively the same thing?
Yeah, it sounds like it might be similar. It's not strictly needed though. It's an optional thing that you can add.
Okay. So, yeah, I think that's the same in mining as well. So one of the interesting ones to highlight here is the welcome to the new beginning. And that's a shout out to, I think, the Ethereum launch or like initial proposal on the Bitcoin Talk forum. And basically like the post was titled "Welcome to the New Beginning." So it's cool to have that that little Easter egg up at the top of the graffiti list.
I'm sure there's a lot of Easter eggs, to be honest, throughout this stuff. There's a lot of messages here. I'm sure there's like some guys or someone saying, help, I'm trapped in a chain. I'm sure there's going to be some interesting stuff that comes up here.
Yeah, one of the interesting things was the Mr. F, who was the first, the very first block.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else to cover on the ETH2 dashboard?
So, I mean, I think people can just have a look around. We kind of put this together really quickly. So, we're open to feedback on metrics and and tables and charts that you want to see in this dashboard. So hopefully it's going to be fun to use, but definitely feel free to suggest improvements on it as well.
Yeah. And also in celebration of the ETH2 launch, we did a little promotion of 2 ETH for ETH2. And that did pretty well. It was exciting to see a lot of people join the Nansen community right after that.
We do still have a couple of slots left, I think. So people can go to nansen.ai. You don't necessarily need to put that hashtag there, but you can just do nansen.ai/ETH2 if you want to get basically the 1 year plan at a discounted rate. So last time I checked, at least half of these had gone already, but I think there should be at least 10 left.
Perfect. All right, well, let's get into more of an alpha session here. I think you were going to give a little bit of a demo on how to find top yield farms, or at least new yield farming opportunities using the Nansen dashboards.
Yeah, so this is a question I get a lot because many of our customers obviously are interested in yield farming. And so there's many different ways you can discover new yield farms, of course. And again, I have to preface this by saying like none of the stuff we talk about here is investment advice, and yield farming in general is very risky, especially when you jump into new yield farms. But so, in addition to having good connections through like Telegram or Discord or whatever, you can actually sometimes discover yield farms just by looking at what's happening on chain. And many people already do this with Nansen, and there are different ways you can do it. But I wanted to show just one simple technique that you can use right away. And conceptually, hopefully, it'll be clear how this can be useful to perhaps other things as well, beyond just yield farming. But so the thought here is you want to understand, instead of going directly to the token that you're farming, for example, if you're farming any kind of new yield farm, you won't necessarily know what the token is even. So you can't really input it as a token into any dashboard. But instead, what you can do is you can look at the underlying token that you use to farm. And so typically this will be stable coins, for example. And so if I open token god mode for USDC and I personally have this kind of shortcut setup, which we have a video on YouTube if you want to see how you can do this. It's pretty easy actually in Chrome to do it, but I just had TGM, token God mode, and then USDC, and when I hit enter, that just kind of gets translated to this this URL that is plugged in USDC for me. So it's a faster way to navigate around the Nansen dashboards, and I recommend doing that. But so this brings up token God mode in Nansen, which I think a lot of people in the stream will already know if they've tried out Nansen before. So it gives you an overview of USDC as an asset, right? Like how much of it is sitting on exchanges, which exchanges hold USDC, the changes over time, etc. But in this case, what we want to look at is this table here. And so balance changes. And so this is showing which addresses have had the largest changes in balance over the last 7 days. And it's by default sorted by the absolute value of change. So you see both kind of outgoing and incoming flows. But if you click it, you can sort it so you only see, you know, the outgoing or incoming. And so now, just to remind you that we're thinking about yield farming. So we want to understand, hey, where's all the USDC flowing? Because we think that's a good proxy to discover yield farms. And so I sort by this, and I see, okay, there are two addresses up here at the top that are actually, first of all, they're quite new. But secondly, they're not contracts. They're just normal addresses or externally owned accounts. Also, they're not labeled. So for now, I'm going to ignore these top two, and I'm just going to assume, you know, that's like, maybe it's something exchange related, or maybe it's just a large investor or a fund or something like that we haven't tagged yet. But the first thing that you see here on top is you see basis cash USDC. And it's also the top one of these robot icon rows. The robot icon, by the way, means that it's a smart contract. And so if you've done yield farming, you know that typically you'll deposit, actually in all cases, you'll deposit funds into a smart contract. And so this is telling us, hey, there's one smart contract where 31 million USDC has flowed into in the last 7 days. And so you can start, you know, looking around for that. And so it's already tagged as basis cash, but even if it weren't tagged, you could try to, you know, click through on Etherscan to see, you know, actually on Etherscan, this is not labeled at all. So you get kind of a value add there for just having Nansen, just knowing what it is. But you can also, you know, try to, you know, Google around for it or whatever you want. But in this case, you already know that it's basis because it's tagged like that in Nansen. And so that's already an interesting starting point. And maybe you'll start Googling around like, hey, what is basis cash? And then obviously you need to be a bit careful because, you know, there's going to be like scams and people with slightly different names and so on. But, you know, hey, now I already found a couple of links like CoinDesk 3 days ago, CoinGecko. And so I can start reading up on this project if I wanted to. So this just, you know, it shows how it's not always about like finding information on Twitter or even on the web. You can sometimes just look on chain to see where the USDC is flowing, and that can source, you know, a new yield farm for you. So actually, maybe let me just pause there to ask if you have any questions or comments here, Daniel.
Yeah, I guess a comment would be, this is an example of one that is just happening in the past week, but really during the kind of yield farming boom this summer, this was a really great way that a lot of people would find new opportunities. And this is just with USDC, but if you kind of get into a habit of looking at the different stable coins and wrap BTC on a regular basis, you can really find these opportunities pretty frequently. I do want to highlight that, like, sometimes if you are going further into the later pages where there's less volume in it, that's when you kind of get riskier. That's when you get in like riskier and riskier opportunities. But I'm guessing kind of the next step that you're going to show here is how you can kind of validate using Nansen who is participating in these yield farms to kind of add an extra level of validation on it, whether it's legit.
Precisely. So, you know, with the disclaimer again that there's high risk and all that, we know that a lot of Nansen customers, they like to try to figure out what are the entities participating in a new yield farm, and that can give you a data point on whether or not it's worth your time or your money, in a sense that you would sort of assume that the people participating have done some form of due diligence. That's an assumption that can be false, of course. But so, as Daniel mentioned, the next step we can do is to figure out, hey, who actually deposited into this farm? Because 31.5 million, fair enough, but we want to break that down to understand a bit better who are the depositors into that contract. And to do that, I'm going to scroll down a bit more and look at the top balances now, because we have a convenient link there, which is not very clearly indicated in the UI, but hopefully after seeing this video, you'll know where it is. So just to remind you that it was 31.5 million. So right away, I can sort of spot that here. This is the address I'm looking for. And this chart shows just like the top balances of USDC. But one cool thing you can do is you can scroll to the right in this table. And this is like not very clear at all. And we should probably hire some like UX designers or something this is what happens when like data people design user interfaces. But at the very right here, you see some links. So there's a link to Etherscan for the address, and you've got two other links. You have one which is called Wallet Profiler, and then one which is Depositors. And so Wallet Profiler, maybe you already know, so I won't cover that here. But Depositors is the one we're interested in because we want to find out who is deposited into this address. So I'm going to click this, and that opens up a new dashboard where it's already pre-populated with the right addresses. And so it's going to show us who are the top depositing addresses into this contract. And you see, just to confirm, the deposit address here is the same one. It's the basis cash one for USDC. And the token that we're interested in being deposited into this contract is USDC as well. And again, you see the 31.5 million. And so, okay, we should probably have looked at this before because this is like not a great example in hindsight, because there's an upper limit on basis cash, right? You can only deposit 20 million. So you won't see right away like who are the largest wallets right away depositing. But fair enough, like let's go through the example. So you can see the top depositors, meaning each of these addresses have deposited tokens into this contract. Tokens deposited net is what that means. And also you can see if they've made transactions in and then also pulled it out again. For example, this address here deposited in and then withdrew and deposited back in again. So that's why they have 40,000 incoming and 20,000 outgoing. You also have the dates here as well. But so if you click through this, and again, well, you see a couple of things here. So you can see some ENS names right away. So don't know who this is. I think I kind of recognize that Twitter handle, but
that's the well, I don't know if that's actually him, because the little star at the end of the ENS name means that ENS name has been sent away, right?
That's right.
So, but Ferocious is an artist. He's got some great art. I think one of his pieces called "Hurt Feelings" sold for quite a bit. But he's cool. Very nice and funny guy. He posts on Twitter quite a bit.
Nice. So maybe that's him. Maybe that's just someone who bought the ENS name. Like, it's hard to say. There's a couple of other ones here. Wilson Huang. He's, I think, one of the first Wi-Fi farmers. So that's okay. We're kind of learning something here. Activist investor, DeFi maximalist. Many people will recognize this ENS name as well. You see a heavy DEX trader here, and who also is a deployer, meaning that they have deployed contracts to the mainnet in the past. So this kind of gives you an idea of some of the addresses that have been depositing into this contract. We see Framework Ventures here. Okay, so but it's 20,000. So I mean, worst case, Framework Ventures can probably afford losing 20,000, right? Which may or may not be different in your case. So these are all things to consider. But yeah, so this is kind of how it would look like. We can see afterwards, perhaps, if there are some other examples where you can actually see a bit more of a distribution that's not totally flat like that. So why don't we try to look at Keeper DAO down here? That's another one. So let's pick the last row here, and I'm going to click the depositors link on this one, and let's see if it's more interesting with regards to the distribution of the funds. So just to reiterate, the reason why this one was not so interesting is that it has like an upper limit of $20,000. And so that means it's going to be a very long and flat distribution where it's not clear who the biggest participants are, because they might have split up their holdings across different wallets just to get under that 20K limit.
Yeah, there's a note I'll just make at the end of that. I did see on Twitter, and this is kind of like a DYOR, do your own research disclaimer. I did see on Twitter that someone had built a tool where it auto spins up different, like multiple wallets for you so that you can deposit more than 20,000 at a time. So for example, if you want to ape in with 100,000 or something like that, it'll auto spin up 5 for you. So you can kind of work around that 20K limit. However, I did see that there was a bit of a fee, I think like a 0.5% fee on that. So if you're trading this opportunity in size, 0.5% can really eat into your returns. So just be careful.
Nice. That's cool. That's a good observation. So looking at Keeper DAO, just to compare and contrast a bit, you see a different distribution. The top one might be some kind of peculiar thing with this smart contract. But if we look beyond that, we've got bigdick.eth. Okay, cool. Hunter.eth. Nice. Well, you know, that has to be a good sign, right? We have a smart LP, so someone that we've labeled as a smart LP because they made a lot of money liquidity provisioning in the past. And yeah, so you can click through this and see if you spot certain ENS names. You see, okay, the 6th wifey farmer ever is farming Keeper DAO. Some other ENS names here: a heavy dex trader and a maker voter. And yeah, so you know, this is, again, just to take a step back, the purpose, like, why are we doing this? We're doing this because we want to understand what are the entities that actually actively participate in these yield farms. So again, to just kind of like go back a bit here, you know, we looked at the USDC token god mode, and we discovered a couple of contracts that had incoming funds, in particular Basis Cash, and we saw that $31.5 million went into Basis Cash. And with Nansen, we were able to go one step further and drill down and see who are the actual addresses that are depositing into that. So it's really as granular as it gets if you want to understand and have more of a comfort on before you send lots of money to these contracts. So that's kind of, you know, how this is useful. It can really help you, number one, discover new yield farms, and number two, do a bit of due diligence on each individual yield farm by looking at who's been depositing into them.
Yeah, one thing that I'll add here, and it's kind of like a transition into a next segment, but it's just building on this same kind of workflow. So here is a single asset deposit contract that we've been looking at. So for example, in Basis Cash, you're just depositing USDC. This is like a classic pool 1, but there's pool 2s in a lot of these yield farms where you're participating in, like, basically you're taking directional risk, either on the underlying or like whatever the reward token is, or just on any kind of volatile assets. But an interesting thing with the pool 2s, so just keep that concept in mind. But Alex, could you go back to the token god mode and then scroll to top balances?
Yeah.
So one of the things that you'll see here in the top balances is liquidity pools on AMMs. So for example, the Sushi swap USDC wrapped Ether liquidity pool. And this is another example of where you can kind of validate who is participating in yield farming opportunities. So if you pull up the top depositors into this one.
Yeah.
So when this loads, basically you'll see who is participating in this liquidity pool. And on USDC wrapped Ether, it's kind of one of the major liquidity pools. So it's we won't necessarily get any huge insights on here, but on some new and emerging yield farms, you'll find people who are taking the impermanent loss risk. And if you see some of the big players in there, again, DYOR, but you can kind of assume that they are making enough on the yield farming rewards to make up for the IL risk. But a lot of these guys are extremely smart. For example, like 3 Arrows, whenever they get into a yield farming opportunity, not this one, but a new yield farming opportunity, they usually have ways of hedging out their position just because they are experienced traders. So, maybe don't ape in after them, but again, just validation on yield farming opportunities.
Yeah. One thing which is kind of cool is we're looking at Sushi Swap here, and you can actually see, I guess this is from the migration, right? Like people migrating funds from.
Yeah, I guess I think you're right.
That's
I hadn't made that connection.
Yeah, I've not seen that before. But yeah, as you said, there's a lot of smart people and smart funds doing this stuff. So it's quite interesting because you can see really what they're doing with their USDC, both in terms of, as you said, more holistically in terms of hedging and so on, but also just where can you actually get the highest APY for your USDC tokens.
Mm-hmm. One thing I'll do, I'm not sure if I want to share my screen. Maybe you can do it since you've already got your screen open. One thing we can look at here is on the topic of Sushi, since we were just looking at the Sushi swap pool. So Sushi this week had a big announcement. They announced their merger with YFI. YFI or Yearn has been kind of on a tear with these M&As with a bunch of different projects recently, but the Sushi one definitely seemed a bit more substantial than some of the other announcements recently. But maybe you can pull up Sushi here on Token God mode.
Yeah.
And we can look at a couple of the things that myself and some of the Nansen community members, some of the Nansen VIPs pointed out that we were chatting about in advance of the Sushi announcement. So if you go to, I guess, top transactions, or maybe it's top balances, I guess we'll kind of explore here a little bit, and this will be a bit of a guided exploration.
Here we see the top individual transactions here.
Yeah. I mean, so I guess one interesting thing to note here is just that there are people who are loading up in size on Sushi. And if you look at days since transactions, I mean, it's all still pretty recent. So a lot of people are still loading up on Sushi. But actually, I think top transactions is a little misleading. Maybe we can go to balances or balance changes.
Balance changes maybe, and look at the top accumulators like here. You see a couple of these guys, right? So these ones are new.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the 5 day one is quite interesting because that was prior to the announcement. So 5 days ago, this person accumulated over 1 million Sushi. I guess 5 days ago, probably the price was hovering around like 140, 150. And then, over the past few days after the Sushi announcement, now it's trading at like 210, 220. So sometimes, go ahead.
Maybe this is a good chance to actually show also the wallet profiler, because so what we did here is we spotted this, as Daniel said, in the balance changes, and you make kind of a mental note or just copy the balance here so that you can find that again in the top balances section down here, and it's this one, right? And then it has a bit more stats on like 7-day change, 30-day change, and so on, but you can then go and do the wallet profiler, which then is going to do a deep dive on the Sushi holdings of this specific address. So I guess here is where you would, if you're thinking that maybe this has been an address that's been accumulating, you'd want to see, what's the source of those tokens, like where did they get them, and did they buy them, in just one batch or over time, and so on. You can try to really understand at a quite granular level how they were getting the tokens. Looks like they got all of the tokens from Sushi Swap, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great point as well. I mean, on AMMs, one of the kind of bigger issues is most people, like an AMM when you're buying is effectively like a market order. And so there's a decent amount of slippage when you're buying in size on some of these AMMs. So you either need to time it when there's enough liquidity, or just kind of take some slippage risk there. So the fact that they bought in size over the span of, it looks like a day, kind of. They started at 5 a.m. and went until 11 p.m. and they bought in 4 batches of around. I can't see because my our pictures are in the way. Maybe can you scroll down a bit further? Yeah. So they kind of just chunked it up into four big purchases. It's quite interesting.
So basically, as you were saying, just to elaborate a bit on that, I guess it might be clear to some people, but if you make a large transaction like this, that will change the price in the pool. And so basically, our bots or arbitrators will come in and then rectify that price, right, versus to the market. And so the price will then, come back to where it's correctly priced, and then they can make another trade, which is closer to the trade that they made originally. Instead, if they had done this whole thing in one batch, they would have ended up overpaying for the second chunk. So yeah, that's kind of why they would do that.
Yeah. So this is an example of a wallet that is worth watching because they got in early, and so they still are holding their position. If they start selling, then that could be a sign that you should also consider closing out your position, or you can figure out your own strategy. Always DYOR, but figure out your own strategy. But you find some of these wallets that were first movers, and if they're first movers on the way out as well, then maybe it's worth looking into.
I have to make one comment though on like medium dex trader, which is a bit of a meme already. We are currently working on revamping some of these labels, because you'd probably want to label this trader as a large dex trader somehow, right? It's not that they're making a lot of trades or very, very frequent trades, but they've made some really big trades. And so in a future version of these labels, this label would be a bit more meaningful than just medium dex trader. Just wanted to make a comment on that.
Yeah. A quick question on the topic of labels. We got in the chat, State was asking about what goes into the Smart LP label.
Yeah, so Smart LP effectively at the moment just looks at how much money has been made in real terms or in USD terms through liquidity provisioning. So if you're an LP and you first of all had net profit LPing, I think the threshold at the moment, it's being worked on because we haven't really rolled out the Smart Money dashboard yet. I think we set the limit at something like $500,000 in returns.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I could be wrong on the exact amount, but I'll check that later. I think it was $500,000. So we did an analysis of basically the most profitable LPs in history, like across different AMMs. And we set some thresholds based on that to surface the ones that have made the most money. You could, of course, have done it based on just percentage returns, but generally speaking, people are often interested in what the big wallets are doing. So we figured let's just look at how much money they've made in USD terms, and that's how it's decided if you're a Smart LP or not.
And does that include like incentives? For example, like when people who LP'd in size in a USDC wrapped Ether pool on Uniswap, does that include their uni rewards?
I actually don't think it does at the moment. It probably should though. So I'll have to go back and check with the rest of the team on this one. I haven't personally been that involved in making that particular heuristic. We can check with them and get back to people in Discord about that.
Yeah. Okay. But good to know. So basically, to reiterate, basically the Smart LP is someone who's made at least a certain threshold of money LPing, and Do we look into like what their initial LP size was? Like how much they're initially LPing as well?
No, we don't really at the moment. So, in that sense, it's somewhat flawed. You could be, dumping in like hundreds of millions of dollars theoretically, right? And then have pretty low returns as a percentage, and you'd still get labeled as a smart LP. But yeah, that's how we've done it at the moment. It should maybe be some kind of combination of percentage returns on your portfolio and also in absolute numbers, because if someone makes a huge amount LPing, but it's a tiny amount, it can't necessarily be replicated at a larger scale.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thinking. But yeah, it is in absolute terms at the moment.
Yeah, it's another thing that's interesting is just, I mean, the concept of IL skews some of this profitability. So some people who made a lot of money in an opportunity because they were in a yield farm, maybe it doesn't reflect them as a smart LP because they just got wrecked on IL but made a ton of kimchi as an example.
Yeah, we do factor in IL though. So in that sense, there is some degree of smartness. Like if they basically get wrecked on IL to the point where they are no longer profitable, they would not be considered a smart LP in the heuristic.
Yeah,
it's really it's net profits after impermanent loss.
Perfect. Okay. What else to dive into now? So I guess just wrapping up the topic of the Yearn mergers and such. Maybe you can quickly go to the token overlap dashboard real quick.
Yeah. Let's see. Token overlap over here.
Yeah. And I was looking at this earlier. I mean, it's not necessarily a high signal thing here, but maybe you can pull up something like YFI and Sushi.
YFI and Sushi.
So token overlap is basically looking at how much overlap there is between these two communities or these two token holder bases. And the thought behind a quick analysis like this is, as these mergers are happening, is there more overlap between these two communities? So it's something to look into. It's somewhat interesting. Maybe this one's not as interesting, but maybe you can check out something like PICKLE and Corn or something like that.
Yeah, just it is kind of interesting to look at the individual holders, which we have charted out here in the scatter plot, because you can see there are actually, so the biggest one, like up to the right, a wallet that holds lots of Sushi and Wi-Fi tokens is actually Binance. They're cold wallet storage, which makes sense. You also see another Binance wallet. You see another Binance. It's actually a lot of Binance wallets here. Huobi wallet, OKX, Binance. Man, it's a lot of Binance. That's another. It's all Binance. FTX. So a lot of these are exchange wallets. So I was hoping we'd see some like funds or something. Gate.io. Okay, here's a heavy DEX trader that has not that much YFI actually. They only hold 1.43. It's something, and then 416,000 Sushi. There's a Binance deposit wallet there. So I mean, you can sort of explore this chart a bit, which can be, sometimes you can discover interesting stuff. I mean, we're just kind of looking at this one on the spot, right? But there is stuff to explore there as well, and you can also see the same information as above, but in a chart here with like drill downs on the specific wallet profilers, if you want to do that. So that's something you can look at as well. And you said you wanted to do this for another token pair, right?
Yeah, let's check out PICKLE and Corn. And Corn was is Cornichon. It's the token rewarded to people who got wrecked in the PICKLE exploit.
I think actually Corn is the one we just added before this call, right? So it might not be reflected.
Let's find out.
Let me do. Oh no, actually it is here. Okay, that's lucky. I think we just added this right before the stream. Let's see. So, okay, so I actually don't know much about this stuff, but so this is basically a token that the PICKLE holders received?
Yeah, I think one had to claim it. I actually don't know too much about it, but these are two tokens offered by one community. So like you can sometimes see interesting things here. You can also see interesting things like, and we don't need to dive in on multiple examples, but you can see things like if a community has multiple tokens, for example, Acropolis has Acro and Adele, or Aragon has Ant and ANJ. Or even something like Curve, you can look at Curve and V Curve, like see how much overlap there is there. These are just some interesting things to look into, and maybe there's not necessarily too much signal on it, but at the very least it's interesting. But going to something with more signal and more alpha, maybe we can wrap up this session by going back into the smart money dashboard and taking a look at some of the new features that we've added there.
Yeah. So smart money is definitely the dashboard we've spent the most time on. And that's also why it's not been released yet. Like we want to make sure that it's high quality before we actually ship it to users. We have started testing it out with some VIP customers who kind of get early access to features, even knowing that there might be errors and so on. So I think hopefully some people watched the stream last time, but if you didn't, the idea with smart money is you probably don't care about all of the 150 million Ethereum addresses that exist in the world. You care mostly about the, say, 0.1% that actually has made good trading decisions and investment decisions in the past. And so the concept behind smart money is really for us to surface that 0.1% or whatever the number is of smart money addresses. And this dashboard shows at an aggregate level as well as at a very granular level what actions these smart money addresses are taking. So it shows the token holdings across the different smart money addresses. And so you see, actually it's a bit more visual. If I scroll down a bit, you can see that a lot of them are staking Link in Aave, which is reflected by this A-Link token. Many of them hold Comp, Compound Ether. They also have Wrap Bitcoin in Aave, USDC. You can you see the list here. X Sushi, which is the staking for Sushi, USDT, Maker, Wrap Bitcoin, TFD. Actually, I have no idea what that is. Let me see if I can find it up here.
Yeah, me neither, actually.
T-Food. Okay, I mean that sounds kind of sketchy in my opinion. But again,
is that new? I hadn't seen that ever.
Yeah, I've never heard of this. Website down. Okay, who knows? Maybe someone actually just manipulated the price and sent it to a bunch of addresses, and then they've targeted some like Alameda contracts or whatever it is. It's a good example of something that maybe we should try to fix before we release this publicly to discover stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a great comment in the chat here saying not so smart money. It's apparently an old shitty ICO that
yeah.
I don't know from when.
That's funny though. I mean, I'd love to actually. I think we used to have a link where you can drill down and figure out exactly
who's holding it, who the not so smart money is.
Exactly, like who's the actually smart, not so smart money. But again, it might be the case that someone actually just sent these tokens to an address, right? And then if the price has been manipulated, who knows? I might take that as like homework to figure out which addresses or which entities hold that T-Food token. But yeah, so you can see a breakdown of like the different token assets. You can also see a bit of the balance distributions across different labels. So Smart LP, which we already discussed, Alameda, A16Z or Andreessen Horowitz, Polychain, and then there's like a huge list here of addresses. It's not very easy to see perhaps on the screen, but it's like a massive list of smart money entities. And this leaderboard, which was actually shipped, I think, like an hour ago. So I've actually never used it before. I'm seeing it now for the first time. So you see a fund's leaderboard. It should probably have some bars to make it more visual. There's still some stuff that like iron out. You see like Barnbridge shouldn't be here because that's like a protocol. It's not a fund or anything like that. So again, this is an alpha, and there are some errors in it still. And you see a smart money leaderboard, which you can sort by token balance, ETH balance, or just the total balance. Metallic smart money, yeah, makes sense. We have this one, which I also have not seen before in practice, but I know what it is because I asked for it. So the idea here is to surface what percentage of the assets that smart money addresses hold are held in stable coins. And so, that might give an indication of like, bullishness or bearishness. Historically, this has been very, very high. Actually, I think maybe this should be flipped around, right? Like this, it's probably not the case that someone would hold stable coins the whole time. So this is, again, like work in progress. It should be improved. The concept, though, is that we want to see what percentage of all the tokens held by smart money are stable coins as kind of a measure of risk off. And there's a bunch of other stuff here. You can see the DEX markets that are being traded by smart money addresses. So actually, this is interesting. Like basis cash looks like it's the top one, right? So that sort of connects with the yield farming kind of analysis we did earlier. So it appears that some smart money is trading, either buying or selling basis cash.
Mm-hmm.
If we sort by 7-day volume, you see more stablecoin related pairs, but and also ESD, empty set dollar. And in 30 days, you see even more like, stable coins, wrap Bitcoin. So these ones are more kind of like, and there's also Sushi here. So I mean, this is, our mission as a company is to surface the signal in blockchain data. And I personally think the smart money, that concept is what does that best. So instead of you having to like scour through these 150 million addresses and just look at very, very aggregated high level macro stats, we've really zoomed in on the stuff that is actually interesting, because the wallets that are trading this are considered to be smart money, at least by us. So that's what we're trying to do with this dashboard, and I personally am very excited about this feature. I expect to use it a lot myself. So just stay tuned until we iron out some of these errors, and hopefully it's going to be available in your Nansen account very soon.
That seems like a good place to start wrapping up. If anyone has any questions here right near the end, feel free to ask in the chat. So we'll give a couple minutes for that. What are you looking at in this upcoming week, Alex, in terms of exciting developments in either DeFi or Ethereum?
So from a product development perspective, we definitely want to ship smart money. So that's the main thing that we want to get out the door. Personally, I think it's fun to follow along on what happens with ETH2. So I'm probably gonna, look at that quite closely and also educate myself a bit on ETH2. I tend to sort of jump into things and then learn about them. That's just how I like to do things. So the validator experience has been a bit like that. So it's a good financial incentive for me to actually learn a bit more about the nitty-gritty details about ETH2. So I'll probably try to educate myself a bit on that as well. How about you?
The old trial by fire strategy. I did see that. I think it was Julien Bouteillou on Twitter posted about people getting slashed quite a bit, but I don't know if that was actually slashing or bad attestations or something like that. So I just saw that this morning. So I want to dive deeper into that and understand what conditions make someone not attest properly or potentially get slashed.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess we should do some kind of internal education in the Nansen team. I think some of the other guys that are not on this call are actually more into the weeds on how that stuff works, and we have people on our team who've actually, built many different blockchain applications before joining the Nansen team, and at least one of them, Akshay, has worked on like layer 2 solutions and certain staking features for like Polkadot and so on. So I think he's probably a good person for us to leverage on his knowledge and experience with those kinds of systems.
Yeah. Someone just asked if the smart money dashboard will be available on the standard plan, and the answer is yes, although we're kind of in the process of reevaluating our different tiers, and if you're subscribed right now to Nansen, it will be available to you, but we might have some new tiers available in the future. The other thing I guess I'm looking at in the coming week is seeing if there's any more Yearn acquisitions and keeping an eye on the rumor mill to see. There's certainly a kind of Kronia premium right now on a lot of the projects that are associating with Yearn, and so trying to understand or trying to predict which ones are going to be the ones that are chosen next could yield some alpha.
That's cool. Yeah, that's very interesting. A big trend. I saw someone say that wifey acquisitions are the new Binance listing or something like that.
Yeah. There's always like these, like every year or two, there's a new thing. So there's the Binance Binance listings. Before that, there was like IEOs more broadly. Then there are ICOs. There's always something that gets repeated over and over until exhaustion, until it doesn't really have as much alpha anymore, or at least it gets priced in. So yeah.
True.
Okay.
In the chat, or
no more questions in the chat. The last one was about the smart money going into the standard plan. I think that's probably a good place to wrap up. We're just hitting the hour mark right now. Just some parting words. If you are already a Nansen subscriber, we'll have these new features shipped to you as soon as we possibly can. If you're not already a Nansen subscriber and you're interested in getting a demo or something like that before making the plunge, feel free to message me or join our Discord, and I'm happy to answer any questions or give you a demo and get you started on your Nansen journey. Anything else, Alex?
No, I think that was a good place to end. Thanks.
All right,
everyone.
Happy exploring, everyone. Have a great week. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.